Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast. Now, I just asked Jeff, who's returning to the podcast, is he ready to record? And his response, of course, was, I am always ready. So thank you, Jeff, for coming on again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thailand looks mighty dark. It's mighty gray here in Nashville, Tennessee. So opposites. It's weird to see.
Yeah. And when I last recorded with Austin, he had the fan on and everything. And I was like, oh, I've got my blue light blockers on and we're completely different time zones here. So it's always that adjustment period, isn't it? When you're working with different time zones.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah.
I'll never get used to it. It doesn't matter. I don't care what anyone says. I'm like, consider your job as a coach 24 hours if you coach internationally, just because everyone's different. People are either the day ahead or whatever, and it's just kind of like, all right, well, I get it's your Sunday, but to them it might be like Monday,
Yeah.
And then I get confused. I'm like, I'll just answer it. You know what I mean? So
do you have online clients that are around the globe and you have to sort of negate that?
I have one I work with out of Ireland and another one out of I want to say it's Slovakia, maybe. They have my brittle bone disease. So I work with them. Both are wheelchair and both are just trying to get a healthy lifestyle and get into the gym and stuff like that. So I work with them in that aspect. Found me because some of my posts I put, and they just kind of were of the mindset like they didn't want to be told to be in a wheelchair the rest of their life, or if they were, at least to create a better life for themselves than what they were kind of maybe thinking they could do. So it's cool. Admire their hard work.
Yeah, I mean,
both of them work full time. I'm like, that kudos to you. Yeah, that's like I tell people, they don't fall victim to their self-defeating narratives that we all write. They actually chose to write a winner narrative, and that's a hard one to do.
Yeah, for sure. I actually definitely was super inspired off the back of our last episode, because I don't often come across even guests on the podcast at times that are completely honest, transparent, and open about every area of their life. And I feel like we really just went into so many different tangents, but I absolutely love that, because from running a podcast, when you're listening, it's like you want to hear some crazy shit, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, for sure. Now, of course, today we're going to be talking about the effects of extreme dieting. And the reason I picked you, Jeff, is for, well, several.
I was wondering, because I was like, I feel like she could pick better people for this. I was like, I don't know. I'm curious to see where this goes today. So hopefully it's a fun one. And for those in the audience, I apologize in advance if I'm a terrible one on this. I don't know.
Well, one of your attributes, which I picked up from the last podcast, and of course seeing your social media, etc., is you are willing to get skinned. Now, there's a big difference, right, with what people bring to stage, as we both know. And I don't know what it's like over in America, but in the UK, there's so many different federations, and there's a fair amount of differences in the criteria, even if you're in the same category. And there's certainly very different levels of lean, right?
Yeah. How many divisions are over there? Because really, we just have over here, we have the NPC, and that's the big one to get to IFBB. Yeah. There's no other one over here than that. And they're the natural ones, if I'm not mistaken. You can get like those natural cards and stuff like that. But, I mean, I admire those guys because those guys get real peeled. Yeah. Some of those natural, but they're small. You know what I mean? That to me is like, I don't know. I was okay with jamming a needle to have a few extra pounds on me. So I feel like I was destined for the NPC, but that's like the only pathway for the IFBB over here. And I think, is that true for the British side as well?
Well, Jeff, I may blow your mind here. So it's
blow it, baby.
There's lots of amateur divisions, so you're sort of entry level, pretty much, anyone that can withstand a prep or bring in a level of condition can enter. So it's super cool. For me, it allowed me to get into the sport. It took me quite a few years and off seasons to actually gain any muscle and become competitive. So it's good because you build up, whether you want to do it or not. And then you have got IFBB and you've got PCA as well, which is over here in Thailand. But the amateur divisions, a lot of them are looking for a much softer look for bikini compared to IFBB. It's a very different look they are after.
Probably not a bad thing. I'll be honest with you. My wife would be like, "Why don't you judge?" I'm like, outside bodybuilding and classic, in men's physique, like I get the dudes, like the men divisions, like it's pretty transparent when you put them, everyone looks great until you put them next to somebody, and then you can really kind of start sorting it out. But when it comes to women divisions, I'm kind of like, I don't know what I'm supposed to kind of be judging, because like example, women's physique, striated head to toe, but I thought it was supposed to be created to not be striated head to toe. So I think the criteria over here in the States is rather confusing, which is why I think someone who's been around the sport for a while, would gladly judge bodybuilding, classic bodybuilding, and men's physique. And then I'd be like, cool, I want relief. I wouldn't know what to look for. And I think that that's where they have to ask themselves as a division or an organization, I think would be better. Where are these divisions going? Like, if every year people are getting better and better, then how do you, I guess, appropriate that over time? But yeah, I'm a little mind blown on that they're that different.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite confusing for competitors as well, and I'd like your sort of thoughts on this. So when you've got this social media hype, right? So around getting stage lean. So if you've got so many different federations and some are awarding the softer look, I've competed and I went on my own solo escapade on the last season and got told I got too lean, which I took as a compliment, to be fair. But
you should.
Well, there was people on stage that I competed with, and Matt said, they're sort of 3-4 stone heavier than you, and they placed higher. Because I was on my own escapade, I was like, this is sick. I've got striations in my cheeks, Jeff. It's like, this is crazy. But it does cause a level of confusion. So then when you have competitors that get, they get leaner than your normal diet, but then the reverse out, the off season, etc., they're maybe treating it like they've got absolutely skinned, and there is that confusion there.
Yeah. So for me, looking at it from the angle, if I was getting into the sport, I would ask what my long game is going to be, and I'd have to work my way backwards. And I think that that's where the women division is. Like, what do you want to look like, and what do you want to feel like at 40? Because I think the women's divisions take more of a toll on you all, if I'm being honest, than the guys. I mean, I'm cool with Jamie Pender. She's a friend of mine, and we've had her on our podcast twice, and she's talked about like having to have like all the injections, stuff like that, where she dieted the fat out of her face. And I just don't think that a lot of people think about that. So, and if you're making it where, depending upon what federation you're competing in, depends upon what look, well, then which federation rises to the crop, like to the top with the crop, right? Because those individuals who are probably could get leaner and get more skinned probably will go to the divisions that reward them. And I think that you're going to get better looking people over there. Weird for me to go down that rabbit hole that way, or
no,
I break it down weird.
It's totally true, because like you say there, being a female, it took me 8, 9, 10 months to recover, like actually recover.
Oh yeah, for me for 6 months.
After
the show. Yeah, and that's like the thing you have to ask yourself. Like, it goes back to, if you're going to compete in the divisions, like, where are you going to go? Like how hard are you willing to go? Like, you go to a regional show, like a local show, and you can see the people who belong there, and you can see the people who did not belong there. It's pretty easy. But I think to get to that national level of skinless, that's what really separates people out. The women from the women, and the men from the men on that.
It's fucked up, and we're going to talk about lots of things that come off the back of extreme dieting. But I really like your point there about what's the consideration when you're 40, 50 and beyond that. And certainly, what are your aspirations in the sport, and what division are you choosing? And of course, I always merit, you've got to try and match the criteria to your best. But I find in the UK, what you've touched on already, sometimes things get awarded that you think, huh? And it can be a little bit confusing.
Oh, I watch that all the time at shows. And and this is something that I could probably speak on. So my leg is different. My left leg looks different than my right leg. And so I get crushed in the symmetry route, but I am peeled head to toe. And I have a really well put together upper body. So my right leg is bigger than my left leg, but my legs just overall aren't as big as my upper body. Mm-hmm. To most people who go, like my friends and my family, they'll be like, I don't understand how you didn't win. Yeah. They'll be like, you made that guy look fat.
Yeah.
And at first it bothered me, like when I first got into competing, because the judging, I didn't understand the criteria. I'm like, okay, I get it. I don't have a left leg. My lower body is, is not as balanced, but holy shit, that guy next to me like looked like he ate KFC the fucking week beforehand.
He probably did.
Didn't even get on the treadmill, and he's missing like 14 body parts that I could count. You know what I mean? Like, and you're just like, holy. And then I started thinking about I started changing my lens to it. And I was like, I love bodybuilding because of what it gave me for my life with my brittle bone disease, all the surgeries. It gave me a way out. It gave me a path to fight back against bullying, a bully who, or it gave me after I got bullied, it gave me a path to prevent that from ever happening again, or pushed around, whatever word you want to use there. Yeah. But I, I decided, I was like, if I keep this mindset, I'm not going to really enjoy doing this. Yeah. So what do I really enjoy? And I was like, I enjoy the constant improvement of what looks better for myself. And I was like, I'm going to hang my hat on that. And I just kind of did. And my placings got better. I got better attitude about prep. But I can't make it make sense. To me, it's like politics over here in the States. I can't make it make sense anymore. So I feel like, there's always going to be controversy in our sport because it's so damn subjective. Okay. And I think it just has to be the question of, when you compete, what are you willing to subject yourself to for those who are going to judge you subjectively? Mm-hmm. And that's the way I kind of looked at it. Like, I know for me, I didn't get peeled until my fifth show is when I had striated glutes. Like, it took that many passes through. So 2006 did 2 shows. 2007 did 2 shows, 2008 did 1 show. And 2008 is the first show that I showed up with striated glutes. Mm-hmm. And it was the first show I was 6 pounds lighter than all my other stage weights. So I weighed in at 154. My first 2 looked better every time. Yeah. But then in 8, I was 6 pounds lighter, made weight at 148. Because my coach Joe, should have sucked you to bantamweight. You know what I mean? And bantamweight was 143 and a quarter. And I'd already felt like shit to get weighing in at 148. I was like, oh, I could never imagine. But it took that many passes to kind of get through to it. And I enjoyed doing it. Yeah. And I think you kind of see people in the sport that it's like, if they can naturally just get peeled, I was not one of those people. I had to really fight, suffer, dig it out over years to make that happen. I can see where that would be really piss me off. Like, if I couldn't help the fact that I just picked up a barbell and I kind of watched what I ate and I looked amazing, and then I get docked for it, I'd probably be pissed, especially if you look the best. And I think that that's why I argue our sport's hard to follow.
Yeah, it's tough.
Because I have so many people, they'll be like, well, why did that girl win? Or why did it, and you're answering questions. I'm like, I don't know. I don't judge that. I'm not a judge, and I think that, how do we grow it to pay athletes for the risk, to pay for all these different things? You got to make it where at least it makes sense. And it sounds to me, if it's going on over there, that's the same shit we see over here.
Yeah. And as a coach, I communicate it. I'm open and honest, and for me, taking someone through a prep, it's like, there's a conversation. Okay. So this is what the prep's going to entail. And of course, if it's someone's first time, you can't necessarily completely get them to understand what you're going to feel like mentally, physically, etc. But it's a serious thing to go down, dropping all that body fat, get into a stage lean physique. If you are digging for condition, it's not just the prep, it's after the prep as well. This crazy period of time where you're like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah, so I explained to the guys who were competed with me, and it's funny because we only ended up with 5 of us going, and there was supposed to be 7. 2 dropped out because it just got hard. Yeah. And I tell people, I'm like, look, man, when I work with people, that's why I don't work with many competitors, is because I tell them, I'm like, are you doing this to actually steal some fucking souls? Or are you doing this to like look good for photographs to make your fat friends feel bad on social media? And they give me the answer like, well, I really want to do it. I'm like, cool. I'm like, I can never get an IFBB card. I'm like, so because of that, I'm going to pour my shit into you. So this is how this works. You're going to suffer and it's going to hurt. I go, when I'm about 2 weeks out, the fat pads on the bottom of my feet are gone. And I have to walk through my house. There are hardwood floors with my shoes on. And my wife thought it was crazy as shit to watch. She just watched like where I just wanted, like, I would go to stand up and just fall back down. From like almost passing out from your blood pressure getting so low. And I'm like, it's not fun. I'm like, but there's personal pride in showing up on stage and knowing that you can look back. I said, because I've stood underneath the lights before and it's hurt my feelings knowing I didn't push myself to the extreme I needed to. Yeah. And I have regrets for how I felt that day on stage. And the times where I was like, no, man, I know, like, I'm peeled and this hurts and I hurt. And oh God, yeah, no, there's pride in that. And then I tell him, I'm like, look, man, you're about 6 months afterwards before you hormonally feel right. I'm like, I competed in July, and this is probably the first week I've had a run of where I didn't feel beaten up, exhausted, my body hurt some way. My sex drive finally seems like it's not all over the place. Yeah. Mentally, I'm not as clouded. It takes time. Like, I mean, I almost see why you want to compete every other year. And I think that that's why the sport washes out so many people is because they can't tolerate the drugs that long because they get sick. And in the case they're not doing the drugs, you also have to then look at the calories of the massive shifting back and forth that they're doing for how long. And I just think it just gets to burn people up. Like, I'll see locally girls compete May all the way through to the November shows here. And then like off season, 8 weeks. All right, get ready. And I'm like, holy shit, what do you do those 8 weeks? You know what I mean? Like, I still feel like shit 8 weeks after a show. Like, what? So, it's kind of educating people and being like, hey, these have been my experiences. This is the suck. And if you want it, it's going to hurt. I have yet to meet someone who's ever been peeled who said that experience did not hurt.
Yeah, because that's the difference, isn't it? Getting peeled. It's very, very different. If you are going for the softer look, the recovery potentially isn't going to take as long. And that's where that confusion around sort of what people do on social media and stuff, easily you can get pulled into, well, someone that's got skinned and their calories go pretty high, they may be using PEDs, of course, etc., etc. And then you've got someone that didn't get to that level of condition and they maybe think, well, why aren't I having that amount of calories and why aren't I flying and I've still got to keep my calories, not that high because there was that difference in their condition.
So I did a prep in 2021. I did Mr. Tennessee. I decided, I had Brandon Cruz on the podcast, who I do a podcast with now. And I decided to see if he was talking shit about taking all these steps. And I started doing steps after meals on stuff. So I began my day with usual 60 minutes of cardio on the bike. And then I would, after every meal, I would walk this loop in my neighborhood for 20 minutes. And I managed to diet the whole time on 2,500 calories. I didn't make one change to my diet for over 12 weeks. The last week, Scoob and I dropped me by 70 carbs so I could make weight because but I had like a little sweet ass out of over the 20 plus shows I've done. That's the only one where I can say my calories were high because I competed just at Master Nationals. In the last 2 weeks, I was at 1384, I think. With 10,000 steps and 45 minutes of fasted cardio 6 days a week. And that's what it took.
Yeah. It's so different to person dependent as well, isn't it?
Yep. But that's the thing. You can't go off social media. And I almost think social media ruined it for some people.
It does.
I think you ruined it you got it with the drugs, you got it with the biomechanics. Like, I'm like, man, I never put that much fucking thought into a barbell bench press. I was just like, is this heavy? Cool. Does it hurt anywhere? No. Does it look stupid? No. Okay. You know what I mean? And that was kind of like how I've always approached my training. And I think maybe I came up in the 90s. Those guys, it was different. And I tell everybody that you have all this shit talking going on. And I'm like, no, I own a gym now. I watch how the 18, 19, and 20-year-olds and all them train versus like how I watched and came up training myself. There was none of the silly one-arm weird shit with taking handles and turning hammer strength machines into. There was none of that. It was how raw could you get? How dirty could you get? You know what I mean? Like Ronnie Coleman. I mean, it's just different. And I think that that's why you see an evolution in the sport, maybe good and bad, you could argue.
I resonate with that in the same token of, so you've said enjoying doing what you're doing, right? Competing, the choice, the privilege, which is what I would say we align with. And there's so much smack talk about, you know, I've unfollowed a lot of people because I cannot deal with seeing stories where people are moaning that they're hungry. We're definitely going to be hungry, right? We're in a prep. So then it's trying to like find all these different ways to make it exciting and all of this stuff. And it's like, enjoy the hard work, the cathartic side. And did you see Arnie and all of these people in the documentaries stressing out, or did they do it like you say, you know, they train, right? They go for a fag, whatever, you know?
So I think that the more competition, I like competing because I offload things about my life. I offload my routine a little bit better. My food is easier planned for. Like right now, I'm in like this off-season phase where I have meals I can flex if I want to. And that's just because I've been dieting for over 28 years. I've been dieting since I was 15. So I like, if I want fucking popcorn, I'm gonna have popcorn. You know what I mean? Instead of the rice. I just feel like I'm there now. But when it comes to prep, I still do the basic shit. I still do the stuff I did when I first started dieting in 2006, like whey shakes, oatmeal, cream of rice, chicken, salad, a salad dressing I like, rice, some fruit, and that's really about it. Like I don't make it more than it needs to. And I think that you have to ask yourself, like, if you're going to compete, like, isn't the journey to get better and see how hard you can push yourself? So wouldn't depriving yourself of some of this stuff be good for you? Like, it's a game to tell yourself, like, when you wake up at 2 a.m. in the morning from your sweating and your blood sugar dropped in the middle of your sleep and you're like, feel like absolute hot garbage. And you're just like, shit, oh man, I gotta change my clothes and lay down on a towel now. Fuck. You know what I mean? Like, and you know, the simple solution is I could stop it. I could just go eat. You know what I mean? I could easily make it go away, and you have to ride that shit out. Like, there's just some weird fun in that. I don't know. And maybe it's because I got denied sports as a kid because of my bone disease, and my privileged white ass ended up getting into bodybuilding. You know what I mean? Because I came from an upper middle class family. I don't know, but nonetheless, here I am, and I'm better for it. And I think that when you go through these diets, that's one area you should offload, because prep's already hard enough. Just make the food easy.
Yeah, I certainly agree. You know, there is enjoyment still in prep foods. Like I sit down and I'm like, right, okay, this is my meal. And actually there's people in the world that don't have access to food. So let's play it straight here. You know, you still eat.
That's why it's hard to get when someone says they're hungry. Like when clients be like, I'm hungry and I'm working with them, I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you're so hungry. You know, like I'll tell you what, I apologize for starving you a little bit so you could get some of that body fat off that you said you wanted, Karen. You know what I mean? And meanwhile, it's like, you know, and it's weird when you do a prep, man, like to remind yourself, like, holy shit, there are people in the world who literally are like this every day and can't help it. And I am putting myself through this by choice, and I can afford to do it. You know what I mean? Financially, mentally, emotionally, physically. I have the even spiritually. I have all the quadrants covered. And that person over there don't have shit. You know what I mean? So I don't like to hear that either. It's also like when people say they're hurt. And I'm like, well, did you think like this experience was supposed to be like one that was thrilling and gave you a bunch of energy and made you feel good? Because it's never been like that to me.
Yeah, for sure. I love being the weird one out, right? Like I used to work in a leisure center and none of them would commit to even a diet. And then I'd be this like, you know, person that they're like, oh, Sarah's doing her thing again. And there was some backlash and whatever. And I'd be like, you eat what you're eating, I'll eat what I'm eating, and I'll get the physique that I want, and I'll push myself out of my comfort zone. That actually made me dig harder because I was like, fuck you.
Oh, I gotta share something real quick. So speaking about dieting in 2021, I did LSD and magic mushrooms daily, rotated all the way through my prep. microdose them, people.
Yeah.
I microdose them.
Yeah,
And
he's not getting.
I had like the fucking best. That's still next to 17. It's my second best look I've ever had, but it was the prep I can recall the most because it was the fucking easiest to me. And and then I did it this year. I didn't do any of that because I wanted to see the difference. And now at my age, I will never prep again without psychedelics in my daily routine because it really made a big difference about like where, like if I got hungry, I'd be like, no, I just need to get busy. And I would easily talk myself out of, where normally you get very food fixated, very time fixated. You're like, oh shit, only 5 minutes has passed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that. And it sped up time to me, but it made me more where I just would alter patterns in my thoughts easier than letting my mind take total control. Where in prep, that's hard. I've had clients admit to me like they've opened up a pantry like at 2 a.m. just stared at it, in the middle of the night, just been like shit, and I'm like, yeah, man, I get it. So, and I don't think people realize that. Like, there's nothing healthy about our sport to get ready to compete. That's why I always generally giggle when a lot of bodybuilders try to give a lot of health advice. I'm like, yeah, okay.
You can make it to a certain degree, right? You can make it as healthy as possible. So you can have some micronutrients there. You can try and prioritize a sleep routine. You can do all the things that are going to help. I always call it like prop you up. But there's no getting away from how hard it is, particularly if you are going down the route of chasing all of the shreds. Because, I mean, there's times in prep where you're literally just like, I don't even know how I'm alive. Like, my brain is gone.
Yeah. Oh, there are times like I'll lay on the couch and be like, I feel like I'm gonna die.
Yeah.
Like I had that whole Ferris Bueller moment with myself where I'm Cameron and Ferris is calling me. I'm like, I'm dying, Ferris.
Yeah.
And then like I have that whole moment with myself back and forth, and then I just shut the fuck up and get up. But I can say having done that prep, and I smoke a lot of pot. So in 2023, I still smoked a lot of pot like I did in 2021. But that was a big difference. I don't know. I mean, I feel like if you naturally are susceptible to depression, like I am, then maybe that might be something to consider. Shit, if you're already going to take drugs to compete, what the fuck is one more thing? Is the way I look at it. So,
Hey,
I mean, is it really going to be that bad for you? Yeah, I mean, I don't think so. I think it kept my mood up throughout it, and I think that was better for me.
Yeah, a lot of bodybuilders do use recreational drugs. It is something that I've spoken about more on the podcast. Now, as you know, you inspired me to do my own one about recreational drugs. And, for me, certainly, I've had a life with, a lot of traumatic events, etc., etc. And it's really helped me get to where I am by using psychedelics.
Mm-hmm. It does. It allows you to, like we had talked about before, assess the situation without as much emotions to it. Yeah. Or if you are emotional, you can understand why you're emotional because you can have a better conversation with yourself, almost a cleaner one. The dialogue is better. I wrote about that for a suicide post. Like men, I think it's 20 to 45 suicides, the second leading cause of death. And it's because I remember, because everything I went through as a kid, like my conversation with myself that I would have daily was never good. It was more ideation of suicide and death than, like why am I in that carried over in time. And then now I'm very careful about the conversations I have with myself. And I attribute that to a lot of getting through prep because just the byproduct having to talk myself through that. Whenever other things would try to flag and hold me down, I would just be like, I'd have better conversations. And slowly I evolved that over time. So prep made me better mentally in a lot of ways. And then I think the psychedelics just really allowed me to take that gray mist and walk right through it.
Yeah. I've had 3 guests now. I've got a 4th one lined up from the documentary Bigorexia. I reached out to them on Instagram and then when I got replies, I thought, fucking hell, this is great. Because, it's an Amazon Prime documentary. Wow. And one of the guys, we were talking, the podcast was really long. And we got to a point where he said, I went through trauma therapy with the use of psychedelics in like medical research centers. So it was like trauma therapy through psychedelics. And he got raped when he was 8. And he spoke about that, and it was like, holy shit. And until he used psychedelics and went through this trauma therapy, he wasn't able to deal with it. He was told to, you know, put a lid on it, be quiet, push on. And then he said, you know, I used psychedelics and completely changed my life. And he said, now I walk into like a restaurant and I look around and I think, what is the good in this place? And that's since using psychedelics. And how can you remove that, you know, opportunity from someone like what you use them for and what I use them for, by making it such a taboo subject at times?
Well, I think you're always going to have, like I wrote about in my book, I felt bad about the fact I was having to use them because they're portrayed as so harmful. And that was just how naive I was to it.
Yeah.
And then the more I just started reading about it, I was like, all right, like it's like fluoride in the water here in the US. Like it doesn't really make much sense. And it comes from like biohazard shit pretty much. But yeah, it's in our water. Like 3 out of 4 Americans are exposed to it. Like it just seemed like the research I was reading, first off, there wasn't much. And you're literally having to go off people's accounts, which made it even riskier considering my trust in humans as a whole is slowly dropping by the day. But, you know, trusting some random chemist to make me the right amount of LSD before I hopefully don't blast off to somewhere I don't want to go was by making friends with them on the internet was a fun experience, but it was a worthwhile experience. But I had to go through it for myself. Mm-hmm. And I hope that my only concern is that as this therapy becomes more out there, is going to be the understanding of how to prepare people previously to it and prepare people on the other side. Because yeah, it's great for unlocking trauma, but I argue like maybe had I not been so dead inside by the time I took them, and I don't say that lightly, I just didn't give a fuck about my life until then, that I might have had different responses that might have been more emotionally inclined that might have led to drastic life-changing decisions. Like they always tell you after you do a trip, don't change your life for a couple of weeks. Let the perspective sit in. Like, I mean, I've had a friend of mine, he tried it. He's like, yeah, buddy, I'm going to do these things. I'm like, holy shit, calm down. Like, I get it. You had all these awakenings. You feel like you were a piece of shit. You're reborn. You saw the God's head. You realize you're about this big. Like, I get it. I've been there. But don't go disrupting that. And he was glad a few weeks later because the insights really were just about those things. But they were things he needed to change about himself, not change those things. Yeah. And I'll be interested to see where that comes for trauma research and how they better prepare for that. Because I think, and I actually wholeheartedly believe that these are really beneficial plants put here for a reason. I mean, shit, there's a whole book called The Immortality Key. I was listening to this guy on Joe Rogan, because I like when he brings the authors on because I like to hear what they have to say about the works. I don't go buy their books. But this thing was all about Jesus and his disciples drinking psychedelic brew, basically psychedelic beer. And they were using the ergot root, and which also breaks down to 25, well, basically LSD. Mm-hmm. And that quote unquote was probably what the mysteries were. And that they were passing it was just mind-blowing. And I'm like, all right, so this stuff, like we now know for a fact because of science that this actually was in this, and this was 100% true. So why are these plants here? You know, and yeah. I think there are understanding of them. Yeah, it's like let's go exist with them. And I mean, Paul Austin, who I've talked to before, he wrote a book all about microdosing psychedelics. He calls it the third wave right now. Because, you know, by the way, it's gone through time frames. So you're kind of like almost this renaissance period of it. But there's like no research on it. Mm-hmm. So I hope they do their due and do research on it. And I hope that they realize how powerful these things can be and don't fuck it up.
Well, there's only hope, isn't there? I mean,
yeah.
What you said there about your friend with having a trip and then being like, whoa, I need to change my life. I think that sometimes when we relate that to a prep scenario, so what can extreme dieting bring? It can bring epiphany moments where you think, holy fucking shit, I need to change my life. And you might be 3 or 4 weeks out from a show. So first of all, ideally, we're keeping the stress managed and we're trying to keep things in your routine. So I always try and say, you know, if you can, allow a bit of time after your show, because you're going to be in a very different state of mind. Essentially, you're starving yourself, and the mind works differently, doesn't it?
It does. I tend to get very quiet the last few weeks before prep. It's just hard to talk. Like it's like I just don't want to. I tell everybody when you go through your first prep, like a lot of my guys, I'll be like, hey, write down the things you liked about the prep, write about the things you don't like. Then your next prep, the things you didn't like from the first prep, work on making those better. But oh, you know, damn, I can't. I'm blanking on this one for an answer right now. I don't know why.
It's mentally when you go through a prep and when you do.
I don't have any of those issues. I think that people, I don't know, maybe the asshole in me is going to come out. Maybe I'm going to sit here and say that people can just talk more than they should, and that you're seeing the effect of that more than rather than what it really is. Like, I don't ever think that I've never, like, when you were saying that, I'm like, who the fuck burns their life down to the ground like a few weeks before prep or drastically changes things? Now, I've heard the horror stories involving Trend. Yeah. I've heard the horror stories involving, hollow testing and things like that. I've heard those, but like, I've never heard of a lot of decisions because I guess I was too tired. So just maybe, I guess if they had enough energy to make those changes, they weren't trying hard enough.
Towards the end, you are a zombie, aren't you? And it's like, I think sometimes there are those different ways of thinking because you're going through a prep, maybe is a good way to think back. Like, I sort of reassess things. So I'll be like doing my cardio or whatever, and it's hard. And I'm thinking, okay, is this area of my life how I would want it to be ordinarily? And I guess maybe because you've got more time to think when you're doing your cardio or whatever, you can sometimes have these things come in your head and it's like, oh, I don't know if I like that bit of my life. Maybe that's something I could change.
Yeah, I haven't really had any of those epiphany moments. I think it's because I'm pretty decent about keeping myself busy during prep.
Yeah.
Like I read during my cardio. So
Okay.
that like keeps my mind going somewhere.
Yeah.
I make sure I keep my in-person client schedule the same. The only time I take off is like 2 days before a show just to rest and rinse. But now I mean, I can understand why people do it because it's highly emotional. Yeah. Because you're hungry and all these things. I mean, I've heard of the fallout, but normally I've ever heard of the fallout, it's been a dude jamming a bunch of gear, and it just didn't go well for him the last week.
Yeah, and maybe they're taking too much Tren and shagging the next door neighbor. Who knows?
Tren is the nectar of the gods, and it's Superman. I love it.
Yeah. I mean, when we talk about sex drive and Tren, and you're going to be on the episode talking about the Tren tales, but like Matt's sex drive is there anyway. But with Tren, it was like, well, I can just keep going, and it's pretty cool,
Yeah, no shit. Fuck that. Tired. I'd be like, I burned too many calories. Gonna go to bed. Night night. Set an alarm for the next meal. Like afternoon naps are best. You know what I mean? See it too.
For sure. So when you are in a prep scenario and like you say, you keep everything the same and what have you, do you just do that because you are who you are and you've got that mentality, or has that sort of got easier over your preps and you've been able to manage the workload throughout as you've done it and you're more experienced, or you've just been able to do it the whole time?
So when I got into bodybuilding and I could drive, I was 15 May. By October, I was at Powerhouse. And then by November, I was cool enough to like kind of like tag alongside a guy in the gym who's bodybuilder. So he used to get to the gym at 4:30 before his shift with the police department to do cardio for a show. And so I would get up at 3:45. I would get dressed, drive to the gym. I'd be there a little early, and I would do the cardio with him for his prep. And I learned to like glean a lot of information from him. And I would go home and do my homework before school. And I would go. And I actually did better that way. Like my grades actually kind of got better. School got easier for me. Where like when I would go home, school was done. I'd usually go to the gym. And then after the gym, I played guitar and then I wanted to go to bed. And then that helped. But so I've been doing that early morning shit. Like I used to work for Homeland Security. My first prep, I had to be up at 1 a.m. And I used to go to the gym, train, and do my cardio. And then I would go to work at 3:30 in the morning at the airport, be done at noon. And then on the way back, go do my second round of cardio, go home, cook meals for the next day. I don't know. It's never been stressful to me. It's always been something I've done. And I think anytime I've ever had anxiety happen, like when I'm on vacation, I usually have I've had to really work to control my anxiety from not having a routine. So I think for people who are anxious, a routine is extremely helpful. I'm naturally depressive. I naturally just like things to be same. I don't like chaos. That I like peace. My household has to be a very peaceful place to me. They're just things I put into place. And I think that my routine allows me to do that. And I have good mental hygiene because of that. Because you got to think, I get up I get up every day still at 3:45 now, and I go downstairs, I pour a cup of coffee, I take my shot of GH, I go in my garage, I put my headphones on, I bike for 20 to 30 minutes, I come out, I stretch for 15 minutes, I shower listening to a podcast. And then when I get to the gym at 6 a.m., I'm on. But I've had a good 2 hours and 15 minutes to myself before I've like really had to deal with anybody other than my wife. So it's a great way for me to start the day. And I'm able to get out of any bad mood I wake up in. I think a lot of people, man, they wake up with their day on fire, they go to bed with their day on fire. And all they do is because everything's fires, they create fires. So the two areas I tell everybody in prep, I'm like, protect your mornings, protect your nights. Like if I know that social media pisses me off an hour before bed, I stay off social media.
Yeah, it's so true though. And you know, I've got my blue light blockers on. Now, it's an example of the things that we can do. So when we're in a prep, you know, I touched on earlier about having a sleep routine and focus on those little things. And it certainly does build that structure. And I certainly agree with you. You know, it's super important. And if you've got all these tasks that tend to get more and more potentially as your prep goes on, so maybe you do more cardio or whatever it may be, it's like, okay, so I can slot that in there. Whereas if you're tight and you go into a prep and your lifestyle doesn't lend itself to a prep, then you're almost starting with failure, right? Because it's like, well, when that creases, what do you then do?
Well, what blows me away is people go and do a whole prep, do really well on a show, and then like completely stop.
Yeah.
That one floors me. That one, and then they're like starting behind the 8 ball on their next prep. And I'm like, why would you bust your whole routine? Like, and I guess that's where maybe for me, if I ever decided to stop competing just because my schedule is different, I could do my cardio after my workout. And that way I could sleep in a little bit if I wanted to, or take clients earlier in the morning if I wanted to make more money. But that would be the only way I would ever break that routine, because I look at like when you're competing, you can argue with me all day you want, but I just find that people are leaner when they do fasted cardio. So that's why I keep my fasted cardio in my routine. I sell myself on the fact that it makes my day better. It starts my day better. You know what I mean? I know why I'm doing it. I just sell myself on the reason why I should do it. I tell everybody when like everybody's looking for the fastest way to like figure something out. And I'm like, I feel like just sometimes just be like, this is what the fuck this is. Addressing it accordingly, figuring out accordingly, and moving on from it will save you a lot of energy that you can use your brain activity on for other things, rather than how do you always figure out how to make something better. It'll come to you if it's meant to be better.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, I had a conversation with Matt, my other half, about this. When we moved to Thailand, like we sort of got out the routine. We would go for a fasted walk in the morning. So I do exactly the same as you. It's come down, put my coffee on, have my GH and my L cart, and then go for a walk or do something for at least 90 minutes. And that's what I did in prep. And I like doing it in off season. And when we weren't doing that, I started getting really irritable, and I'd feel like, oh, this is not a good start to my day. And I try and busy myself doing something else, but I need to go and do something. And I think we're probably both quite purpose-led in that regard. And it feels good, right, to start your day in that way. I don't know how you can just roll out of bed and then just like eat breakfast and go to work.
Yeah, most people roll out of bed, brush their teeth, run through the shower, put their clothes on, go flying out the door.
Yeah, I'm like, it's so weird.
I mean, like I said, I think I got so lucky to a degree because I got into it 6 year age. And it's interesting to see my 12-year-old son getting into bodybuilding and reading all the books and all the stuff, and how he's been taking it. And I was like, damn, I was the same way. Like I told him like last night, I was like, just do your homework before school. And he's like, yeah, you're probably right. That'd probably be easier for me. So this morning he came down, he ate his breakfast. I'm watching him because I work from home Thursday morning. So if I don't have meetings that morning. And so I got to catch up with him. Little dude's 12 years old, 65 pounds, 50-gram whey ISO shake, 2 packets of oatmeal, a banana, a whole serving of peanut butter. And then he's packing his crazy the amount of food that kid eats. I'm trying to get him to get a job. He's a lazy ass. But I watch him with the same routines. And I'll be honest, he even told me, I think it was last week, him and my stepdaughter both, that since I kind of challenged them to do walking and do just take better care of their things, that they're like, yeah, we feel better, and I'm like, okay, well, that's all I asked. Like, because I tell them all the time, like, if I'm wrong on anything I tell you all, you guys can tell me to shut the fuck up. And I tell my clients the same thing. I'll be like, that's an honor you can earn. I'm like, but if you can argue with me that sleeping 8 hours was worse for you, I will gladly take that one. You can punch me square in the fucking face. You know what I mean? Like, we'll do.
Let's talk about sleep actually in a prep. So as that potentially gets disrupted throughout your prep. Now, I do know examples of people that still get 8 to 10 hours in a prep at the tail end. And I think
that's me.
Really?
I sleep like a baby. Jason, my good friend and coach, Scoob, he's been with me for over 10 years. He laughs. So for those who don't know, and this will appear on the trend episode, so I won't divulge too much, but I am the king of running high trend and low test, and I feel great on it. My blood work is fine. I sleep 8 hours. My resting heart rate is like 52. I'm talking like 700 megs a week. I don't have panic attacks. I don't have any of that shit. I sleep amazing through my preps.
Do you? Even at the tail end?
Yep.
So,
dude, they were like, you have laughed your ass off at me on my way to Masters Nationals. I slept the last half of the car ride. I got there. I went back to sleep. I made weight pre-jet that morning because of where I'm at my weight class. I try not to pump up too much because it makes my upper look too big. So I'm on the floor sleeping as they're lining up people for pre-judging. Like I don't have that issue. I never have had a sleep issue with prep. Never.
So what
the first prep I did in 2006, I had like some sleep issues, but also had a newborn son at the time. So hard to say. But otherwise, I've been like sweet pea. Never once have I had a problem with sleep.
Wow. Now, when a client comes to you and they say, Jeff, I haven't slept for 3 weeks. What do I do? What
First of all, fuck you for waiting 3 weeks to tell me. Thanks, assholes. I cut your food, which was the bad idea, and upped your gear as a response to your lack of progress. You could have saved us both some effort. I'm real big about the cortisol mitigation. So lowering that, phosphatidylserine. I'm a real big fan of Corta-Ease by New Ethics, and then Cortisol by MPA Supplements, Matt Porter. I really liked his version of cortisol. Brandon explained it to me because Brandon used to work in the supplement industry. It's something to do with the way that he extracted and got that phosphatidylserine is like very pure. And I could take that before bed, and clients also say they sleep great. Delta 8 is a form of marijuana that the gummies make you sleep really well and does not disturb REM or deep patterning, from what I've seen on people with the aura. And then melatonin is not a bad one. Although I did read a cool book about melatonin where the guy argues you should be doing 200 milligrams up your butt through suppositories. Wow. Yeah, no, it's apparently how you're supposed to do it. It's for more of the antioxidant thing. Yeah, it's what was it? Melatonin Miracle Molecule by John Luriance. Lieuranc. Wow. So it was fascinating. So I started trying to see how high I could get my melatonin. And Jason was like, I got to like 40 milligrams before it had the opposite effect and started keeping me awake. Like I would wake up an hour before my alarm completely refreshed and felt like too good. But then I could tell as during my workouts, like I should have been getting that extra hour. Like I could tell it showed up and it just woke me straight the hell up. But you got that one. And then, low hanging fruit, like breath work, being off your phone, avoiding things that piss you off, just telling your partner, like, hey, I've only got a few more weeks. Not saying our relationship's not important, but if it's not anything that's going to burn down the house and end us deciding who gets the dog, then can we kind of table it for a nice dinner after prep, and then I'll take you out and we'll have our conversations and go from there.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of ways. So you do a damn hot shower an hour before bed so your body will rapidly cool off.
Yeah.
Light yoga. You got the blue light blockers. I mean, I think you can make it as extreme as you want to or as basic as you want to. I don't have a problem sleeping. I hit the pillow and I'm quite tired, but I think that I keep myself active enough throughout the day that when I go to bed, I just go to bed.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if for me it would be something to consider, but in my last prep, my stimulant use went pretty high. Well, high.
Yeah.
I'm saying high, but you're on 700 trend, so may not be to you.
I don't take Clem though.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I was on Clem.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
How much? I can't take it. It makes me skip my heartbeats too much, and it fucking freaks me out.
Well, I need to tell you a story then. Well, I got up to 120, and I was on yohimbine, and
now yohimbine I'm on. I'll use that, but not the Clem.
Yeah, so I was 20 yohimbine, 120.
You're brave.
And yeah, mate, it fucked me up. So after I did 4 shows. One of them was a regional, and obviously for a peak, you put the carbs in and whatever. And my coach and I hadn't had a conversation around how much to dose my Clen 2 days after the show. So I went back to my normal 120. Fuck me, right? I went for the walk, got home, and I went upstairs and I was like, I think I'm going to die. So I just laid on the floor, so lean. And I was laying there with the fan on and I was just sweat. I thought, I'm going to die. Then Matt came up and he was like, I sense something's happened. Are you all right? I just saw my feet from the end of the bed. And then I spoke to my coach and he was like, oh, okay, I probably should have maybe brought your dose down and we could have built it back up. And I was like, that's the closest I felt to death. I was literally like, what is happening? But I don't know if that has a knock-on effect maybe to sleep as well for if someone's using stimulants.
Yeah, they are. I mean, that's gonna because you're hitting gas and then you have to try to hit the brake, right? And that's hard to do. I have found, I think that if you're gonna do it, just don't get I think stimulants where you can kind of get screwed up long game in this.
Yeah,
because they're harder to recover preps. I noticed, like, if I had to go, and that's why I got away from them because I did use Clint early on, and I just felt terrible. And I noticed I just had a harder time, kind of like with the energy with it, different stuff. I would rather snorted cocaine if I could have gotten it readily by source and not fentanyl loaded, just because I would have been like, all right, well, I know what this little snort off of key bump is going to do before this workout. You know what I mean? It's going to be fucking good no matter what. And get the fat burning. I mean, so that will have an effect. I liked, and you got a lot of average Joes and a lot of gym pop people that will take a lot of stimulants in the form of those energy drinks that will crush you and things like that. But I think when you're doing, your approach should be to only use the stimulants when you really need them and to stay leaner in the off season if you're going to go with this. Yeah. I think that's the one thing that's gotten better. I know that it's still big to push a bunch of body fat on with muscle. I've seen that and just gain a bunch of weight. But man, that sucks on the back end. And I almost think it's harder to do. Yeah. And I've done them both ways. So I've had a coach who's taken 44 pounds off me in 8 weeks. Yeah, it was not fun. That was by 2008, oddly enough, where I had the first time I showed up shredded. He crushed me. It was 3 hours cardio a day. It was an hour and a half in the morning, hour and a half post workout. Yeah. And my workout was all giant sets like Milos. It was a hard fucking 8 weeks, girl. Very low food too. Like one of my meals was 8 can of tuna with 8 can of green beans. Like it was like, yeah, so fucking low.
So your appreciation for food changed off of the
back? I've graduated now. I don't eat any more seafood unless it's ahi tuna or really well cooked salmon. He also dieted me 6 weeks one time on nothing but tilapia for all 6 meals. And I was so fucking disgusted by tilapia. It was tilapia, sweet potatoes, and asparagus. That was like my food forward choices.
And your piss smelled.
Oh, I smelled probably terrible.
I wonder if we could talk a bit about food relationship actually, because of course, that is going to potentially come for a lot of competitors. There's a lot of first timers that listen, right? So you're a normal person, then suddenly it's like, right, I'm going to competition prep. Okay, so 1 week you're eating a pizza with your family. The next week, I cannot eat that. I'm in a bodybuilding prep. So that adjustment is pretty big for quite a lot of people. And it's a bit of a sticking point sometimes with food relationships and maybe disordered ways of thinking. Sonia came on the pod and spoke about the difference between actual food disorders and disordered eating, and that was very informative. And I think that sometimes there's that confusion around, you know, when you go into a prep, if there's already some behaviors there, then people go, well, bodybuilding made me have a food disorder or whatever, because your relationship with food changes, right?
Well, I actually had to have this conversation with my 12-year-old because he's really gung-ho. And I was like, hey, let's talk to you about a few things. I mean, he knows about steroids. Like, you know, he had kind of suspected, you know, and we had talked. I said, sure. And, you know, he's no dummy because he's heard me talk to guys before at the gym, you know, just by being around the gym, you're going to hear that. I said, look, there are a few things. You're never going to look at your body the same. That's something you should understand, that once you see yourself skinned, you're always going to be fat. Yeah. I go, and that will never change. I go, I will forever consider myself fat. I could be walking around at 8%. I still think it's too fat. So the other thing is, you're not going to look at food the same. I said, but that's because society doesn't look at food good. I said, that's not anything to do with you. Yeah. I was like, and they will put that on you. And that's my argument to most people. I'm like, wait. You're wanting to compete. And they're like, yes. I'm like, and you want to like try to really go far. I'm like, yes. I'm like, okay. Then I have a question. Like, sure. And I'm like, if you were going Formula One racing, they're like, yes. And I'm like, would you want the best car? I'm like, yes. And I was like, would you want the best gas? I'm like, yes. I'm like, why the fuck would you want to ask me when you're going to get a pizza meal? Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of almost like big boy, big girl conversations that we stopped having with each other. Yeah. Like, hey, I get it. Like, it sucks. You can't go out with your friends and family. But guess what? I've never had friends or family give a shit if I brought a meal with me or if I just ate a salad. And I just saved my salad from my own dinner and just ate it with them to make everybody feel good. And I can have a Diet Coke while I'm sitting there or something, you know, like I argue that everybody's always looking for the things that they're giving up. And I'm like, yeah, but man, you're jamming yourself with gear. You're pushing yourself to extremes. Even if you're not jamming yourself with gear, you're still pushing yourself to extremes. And that food generally doesn't really do you good. Like you have better pumps in the gym. Yeah, you look a little bit fuller and rounder, but like then your digestion is usually torn up. Yeah. Sometimes people go overboard with that because they're so hungry. Yeah. And that's when I think it's a slippery slope. And I'm kind of like, I've told Keegan, I'm like, because there was issues for me when I used to be single. Like girls, I go on dates and girls be like, oh, you're ordering the steak and the potato. I'm like, yeah, I eat this way. I don't give a shit what you eat as long as you take care of yourself. Sure. If you want the fucking nachos, that's on you, but I'm going to eat this. And it's almost like you have that issue. So then you ask yourself, what am I missing out? And I can be honest to everyone listening, but in my 28 years, I've looked back collectively over my life and I've drank there some good amount of my times. I've partied and everything else. And I've never woke up the next day and gone, you know what? I'm really missing out. I've always been like, you know, that was a fun experience. Whew, cool. Can't wait till the next one. Back to work. You know what I mean? Because I realized like that would be fucking horrible and unsustainable to me, at least. So I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything.
Yeah, I don't. Again, it's that privilege of doing it. Now, what I'd like to ask you is, have you ever cheated on your diet in a prep?
Sure.
What did you have? What happened, Jeff? Tell me all.
Oh, I didn't go like, it wasn't like that. Like I would have like an extra protein bar.
Okay.
Or like extra rice cakes or something like that. I've never blown going off the rails. The time where that usually was hard for me when I first started prepping was post show. Yeah. Because everybody was bringing me fucking cakes, cookies, like that was their way of congratulating me.
For sure.
By giving me a bunch of shit. And I mean, I was getting booze because I love Bert. I mean, it was funny to me, but you know, I always have more time because you felt bad. I was like, oh shit. And that was until I grew up, you know, and was like, well, hey, I appreciate you bringing me the cake, but I'm probably gonna give it to my kid. You know what I mean? Like, sorry.
You don't have to.
And that's where I tend to struggle. I didn't have too much of a problem in prep. And I think that's because I knew like in my head for me, I like the role of underdog. I like it in business. I like it in everything else. I think when you put yourself in that role of like, these guys expect me to show up and look like shit, they're going to embarrass me. Fuck them. I'm going to embarrass them. You know what I mean? Like, and I could easily kind of like talk myself off the cliff. But again, I think that in prep, people tend to just get, when they get more tired, they get lazier, and I think you get more chance to think about shit you shouldn't. And so I argue to guys, I'm like, look, when you're tired, go for a walk. It's gonna hurt, it's gonna suck, but you get out of your house for a few minutes. 20 minutes later, if you're still hungry, that might be a different story. You give yourself 20 minutes, go for a walk, get out of the house, read a book.
Yeah, well, if you haven't got it in the house as well, this is always, the ideal setup.
Yeah, but you get it delivered to you now. That's the problem.
Yeah.
And I don't give a shit. They'll be like, oh, delete your food apps. I'm like, well, the person can fucking re-download them if they want to. Like that. Oh, delete your apps. Oh, Jesus. They can never come back if I do that. Don't tell me to. All right.
Well, I guess if you've got kids as well, if there's stuff in the house maybe, or your other half would potentially.
Keegan, nope. We don't have that. I've always been good about that.
Yeah.
I've never had that issue, but I just have heard from a client of mine, minute she did this past show, he's like, dude, before I knew it, my Instacart cart was like $100 coming to my house. And he's like, I ate probably $50 of it and felt bad and threw the rest away. And I was like, so that explains the 4.75 pounds you gained from Friday to Saturday. Cause I was a little curious, like what was going on with that. And I was like, did you just straight up like just eat like a piece of like a rock or something? Like, like what? I don't understand. And then he told me, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, we make mistakes, don't we? What you said there
yeah, but I think
it's valuable because tell your coach that happens, communicate it, because obviously the coach is going, like you said, what the fuck's going on? Everything's been pretty linear, everything's going well. You're definitely in a deficit. I can't explain what's happening here.
So here's the thing. I think it's a mindset talk, and you just got to ask yourself, are you okay if you cheat on your diet with identifying as a loser? Because that's going to put you in a better position to be a loser. And I can have conversation with myself because I already know my leg that I've got a strike against me. So I've got to make sure that that's an area I can control. And I'll be honest, like there's nothing more rewarding I tell my clients than being like, who I work with, the guys, I'm like, your goal should be to make the other guy look fat in every fucking photo that you stand next to him. I'm like, that way your whole family looks at you and goes, yeah, you kicked that asshole. You could have placed worse than him.
Yeah.
But anybody who sees photos and you'll look at it, and I'm like, and you can control that. You can't control like we started about the show with the different divisions. You can't control that shit. Yeah. But you can control conditioning, and you know what? That's respect from competitors. Every time I see a competitor who's shredded backstage, and there aren't many, I'll fist bump. Like, I know what you did, man. Because I know where you have to go to get there. And it's not fun, but it can be a good experience. And I think it's just a matter of, while it might not be fun, I've learned to make it where it's enjoyable to me in other ways. Like I see the growth of me happening in other areas.
Yeah, I personally, it was my hardest prep, the last one, but it was so sick. Like I just felt so much achievement. I was so fulfilled that it was like, whatever happens, I might get awarded, right? Like you step on stage and sometimes someone completely gets awarded and you think, well, I don't know what's happened there. So I thought, well, why not go on this personal exploration? Might get awarded, might not, but I felt so fulfilled. I was like, whatever happens, happens. And what an experience. And, people say to me, for a female to get skinned, it is hard, but I don't know. I absolutely loved it, Jeff. It was fucking sick.
Oh, it's hard for a female to get skinned. My ex was a competitor. Women's physique, and she could get peeled, and I admired it. Yeah. I know how hard that is, especially working with. I don't work with many women anymore. I work with them post competition.
Okay.
To kind of like help them like on the other side.
Yeah.
Kind of get their hormones right and things like that, and just figure out other goals to make than this one look about body fat and how peeled you are, because that's really hard. I think it's sometimes harder for women to come out of the sport than it is men, from what I've seen, because men will be like, well, I'm still fucking jacked, and it's fine, that you can find other goals for them, right?
Yeah.
Where with women, it's the relationship with the scale.
Yeah.
Because it's like, dudes, the moment you see yourself just that peeled, you're forever fat. I'm sure as a woman, the moment the tying of the scale to that, you're like, oh my God, I'm like 115. I haven't been 115 ever.
Yeah.
And then, 4 weeks later after the show, you're 125. And it's just water and extra food and things like that. But it's still a mind screw. I've seen women have a real hard time coming out of it.
Yeah, it is tough. And also, the show day, you're fucking hyped, the adrenaline, etc., etc. Especially when you first get into it, there's not really expectations, although if you put them on yourself, fine. Or maybe your coach says, not what we came for if you didn't win, and all this shit that goes on. But you want that show day again. It's like you're up there and you're doing something phenomenal, and all your friends and family, it's like, wow, I've done that. And it can be quite hard to come away from the sport and almost find purpose in life when you've spent 6 to 10 months or however long in this structured routine. So that's where, when you said earlier, keep the structure there, because yes, you might drop some fasted cardio or whatever, but you can still have your same structure and maybe fit it with a walk outside or something like this. It's so important, because otherwise you're just off the edge of a cliff. The next day you wake up and you think, holy fucking shit, what do I do now?
Yep. No, I agree. I know that that's like post show. I don't worry about the first 12 weeks, as I know I'm pretty motivated.
Yeah.
I start game planning for the next 12 weeks after that. Like when that drops a little bit, like how am I going to adjust some things? So one thing I do is I go back from 5 days a week to 4 days a week of training, and then I immediately adjust my calendar to fill up with things.
Yeah. Yeah. What would you recommend if someone's listening? And this happens a lot over in the UK, where people stop having a coach directly after the show, and they sort of feel like they want to do the reverse out on their own in their off season. For me, I would say the importance of a coach is pretty high. Would you agree?
Yes, but I think that people pick coaches based upon a result.
Yeah.
And I think you should pick the coach that you can work best with for your result. And I think that's a personality gimmick.
Yeah.
Or a personality thing, not gimmick, but personality thing. Where, like Jason and I get along really well. It's easy. I send him my shit and I don't say a word. And he just tells me what to do.
And you do it.
And yeah, I do. And then the same with Joe, who's handling my programming now. Joe Jeffrey out of the UK. I just send him my shit and I'm like, checked in. And that's all I say. Because I'm having a coach. I think that in the off season, that's when your next show's won. So I think it's a piss poor strategy to lower it down, but I also understand because a lot of prep coaches charge a lot of money. That's why I charge just a flat rate year round. And I'm like, look, the off season is not going to be as much interaction between you and I, because it is what it is. But during prep, like I will ask the last 4 weeks for pictures morning and night.
Yeah.
Daily. And I'll kind of be like just running, because we'll be trying different things or whatever, depending upon where they're at.
Yeah.
So it makes up for itself. And I tell everybody, I'm like, but you see that now, like people $600 or a month or just all these different costs. I'm like, holy shit. And then you got to get a posing coach. Yeah. And then you got the supplements, then you got the drugs, then you got to afford the good food. And before you know it, you're out of pocket $1,500 a month for a hobby, which is, I did it the math before and I was like, man, I probably could own 4 or 5 Supras by now with how much I've poured into this over the day. I got one and I'm like, man, I could have a garage full of them, like kind of conversation. So, but it's made a livelihood for me that I wanted when I was like 18. I remember I was resentful. My parents made me go to college. I wanted to go run a gym or a GNC.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't fucking want to go to school. I want to do these. And my parents were like, oh, you'll never make any money doing that. And now I'm like, man, 43, I'm making stupid money between my gym and everything else. I don't know what to like do with it half the time, because I live so well below my means. But then, in 2010, I was going through my second divorce. I was coming up off the mattress. I was on the floor in my friend's house on an air mattress for a couple months, so I could afford a bed. So, I mean, I know the trajectory of change. And all that to be said, I think that when you get into this pursuit, you should look at it for, it's going to take some skin out of you in a lot of ways. And I think that, again, it goes back to, if you're not going to leave your routine during prep, why would you leave your routine during the off season? Yeah. And if you're well meshed with your coach, and maybe it's like you have an issue where you're like, hey, I need to go work with this coach for a little bit on these things, and I'll come back to this coach who got me shredded, because that's what you're trying to understand. And I know that everyone's different. Like I have a client of mine that I prefer for him to send like a voice note rather than just type out an email. And I have other guys, I'm like, please don't send me a voice note. It confuses me when you start talking about your dog. I don't know what the fuck's going on. just write me an email. You know what I mean? So you kind of learn how to have to adapt.
Mm.
And I think that the off season is a time where you can actually work on communicating better with your coach and making sure the preps are better, making sure that the outcomes are better. It just depends upon what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
But that would not be at a time I would advise that. I've always had a coach year round.
Yeah.
Because I think it's just somewhat important to keep a hold of yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Even at times when I've been, in off season, and it's like, my 8th off season now, but even when it got to 3 or 4, people would say, do you really need a coach during that time? And it's like, it's not always. Some of the calls would be around stuff that's happening in my life. He became sort of my confidant, and Tom is now as well, and he's coached by Joe Jeffrey. And it's nice to have that person in your corner that's outside of your intimate relationship. Because sometimes we talk about stuff and I think, Christ almighty, I didn't even know that was in my subconscious. And then it helps me reflect and become a better athlete, I find.
100%.
Yeah. It's a really nice bond that you can get. And of course, if you work with someone for a long period of time, you start to fine tune things with that athlete, you learn their body more. And then in my experience, the peaking not becomes easier, but you know what to do and you tweak it or whatever, but you learn the athlete's body. And I think this is super important.
Yeah, like Jason, when I first started working with him, I had to be like, hey, he was like the first prep was like, holy shit, you weigh. I said, I historically lose weight quickly at the front of prep. And the last fucking 10 pounds are a shit show grind. And he's like, okay. And he like totally went with it. And then he was like, wow, you're right. And so it's now evolved to a, hey, this is what I think based on what my week's been like.
Yeah.
And what I'm noticing. Like this last prep, I was cruising along, and this was really interesting. I had a beautiful fucking off season, a beautiful one, strung it together, just didn't miss. Tried RP strength training, way of training, made some progress, cleaned up a lot of old injuries, then went back to my bro split. Obviously started growing again more from that because I was used to it. I know the exercises my body likes, started pumping the gear, cruising, and then out of nowhere, I had 2 weeks where nothing changed. Couldn't even see a visual change. And I could tell it. I could tell it in just my everything. So he moved me into keto. And within probably 4 weeks, we had shaved off and moved enough, like we had gained ground back. When we back into carbs, I started dropping like really fast to the point we had to feed me up. So very different prep. Nice. And I tell everybody, I'm like, you can't have perfect off season and the prep still be fucking weird. Yeah. Like, just because it's perfect one way through, like everything's different. And that's where I'm like, just get into it, hold on tight, and have fun. Who gives a shit? You're all big boys, we're all big girls. Being hungry sucks. Extreme dieting sucks. Extreme training sucks. Taking 7 shots a day sucks when you're like 4 weeks out. All sucks. Yeah. But it's a niche endeavor, and if it was easier, it'd probably be more popular.
What a way to summarize. But before we wrap up, I do need to ask you, what was your first cycle? This is what I keep asking guests.
Oh, that was easy. When I turned 18, I told my mom I was buying a steroid cycle. So she gave me money for it. Well, I had been, at 15, I got into bodybuilding. I've been working out for a couple of years beforehand. Weights kind of get me stronger with wheelchairs, crutches. So I was already well versed in that kind of stuff. And I wanted to fucking do it. I wanted to go all the way. That's why I was pissed at my parents for not letting me just go to college. Like, the whole disowning thing, I don't care what you say. Like, that's a really good threat when you're 18 years old and you don't have any fucking skills. So my little baby ass was staying at home. So, and I was going to college, but I bought Deca and D-ball. And the guy literally looked at me and goes, if you don't put 20 pounds on from this, bodybuilding is not for you. And I was like, all right, a lot of pressure. I like it. Then I was so pressured from the steroids. I was like, well, if this doesn't work, then fuck it. My whole life's over. Like I want to go do this, be a bodybuilder and have this life of supplements and everything else. And I put like 15 pounds on like 5 weeks. And they were those little pink tie from Thailand D-ball tabs. Oh. And they came in these strippings, and I'll never forget it. 4 of them for a workout, like within a week, like my bench press, like was completely changed. I was like, holy shit. And then I felt so good from the Deca. Like, I couldn't believe how good I felt from the Deca. And then after that, So that was 200 milligrams of Decadurabolin a week and 20 milligrams of D-bol a day. Was my first cycle. I did it for 12 weeks, and then I got on to Cypionate immediately after with Anavar tabs. And I, for the first year of steroid use, did a oral and a injectable at the same time for a whole year straight. Probably not the smartest, but I had no ill effects, so it was fine for me.
You are the phenomenon.
Listen, man, I think Anadrol is a hell of a great drug. I think that, like I said, I mean, I get the safer model use and all that stuff, but I'm kind of like, look, man, I have a friend of mine, I'm very close to, he's a pro, and he's like, he told me, he's like, I didn't want to fucking look like that. He goes, I wanted to be over 300 pounds and make a statement. And he goes, and that's just what it took. And I'm honest, I'm not gonna lie. I'm like, I think that there's too much of that shit, the cell coaching going on. And I'm like, look, I take Tren when I compete, and in the off season, it's changed for me as he's gotten older. And Skip Hill and I talked about this, and I'll summarize this to everybody. Our conversation: in your 20s, you can push it more. In your 30s, you understand a little bit more balance, and in your 40s, you can still push it the same, but your window of opportunity is just shrinking. So, meaning like 16-week prep, I'll fucking blow it up like I did this past year with gear. The other weeks off, I'm just running base test and more GH, and that's the only difference. And it's just changed over time.
Yeah, well, that's as well another thing where you can work with a coach and get an understanding. If you're going down the assisted route, right, it's not just we'll take this and see what happens. You can actually get the education nowadays generally if you find a good coach. Joe, actually, I did a podcast about this. Joe helped me understand, and really, you know, he takes a lot of time to do, you know, he's got the Physique Collective and different, you know, things that he does on social media and stuff. There's a lot available, so you can get a bit more understanding now, rather than maybe back in the day where it's like, have a bit of this.
Oh, I had no clue my first prep what I was doing. I just went and basically eating nothing, and I don't know. I think I'm happy that I had that experience, because I walked into it, went, well, shit, I didn't know anything. You got fifth out of like 18, like, wow. And I'm the lightest guy. Like, man, if I actually learned something, like, and it made me want to go down the road, you know, even more. And I think that that's the cool. I almost think that bodybuilding, everyone tries to consume it up front, and I get it, but I'm almost like, consume the basics, and then as your journey comes to you, go find the other nuances. It makes it way more enjoyable. At least it has for me.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree. Love the journey. Well, thank you, Jeff. And of course, if anyone listens and wants to follow you on Instagram or have a look at your book, which we mentioned last time, is that live yet, or are we doing artwork?
So we are looking within 60 days. I found someone to publish the book so I can sell hardcovers. The cover looks like it'll be done within a week or two. And then after that, I've already got everything else I needed. It's just a matter of just getting it sent off, getting a hard copy. And once we get that, we'll sell it.
Oh, sick. So that is incoming. So thank you, Jeff. And of course, thank you to the listeners. And I will speak to you next week.